Right now, somewhere on this planet, a factory is pumping out plastic, and by the time this year ends, the total will pass 430 million metric tons. Line those tons up as freight cars, and you could wrap them around the Earth 7 times. Here's the part most people get wrong. We assume most of that plastic gets recycled. It does not. Less than 10% of every piece of plastic ever manufactured has ever been recycled. The rest is still out there, in landfills, in oceans, and now, according to researchers, inside human blood, lungs, and arteries. A material that conquered the world in about 100 years is now showing up inside the people who made it. Then, in October 2025, a small research team at a forestry school in northeast China published a paper that made materials engineers stop scrolling. They said they had built a new kind of plastic made entirely out of bamboo, not bamboo blended with oil-based plastic. Not a partial fix. A material that is stronger than the plastic in your house right now, that runs on the same factory machines companies already own, and that fully breaks down in ordinary soil in about 50 days. To understand why that claim matters, you need to know why plastic won in the first place, and why nothing has ever replaced it. Look around any room you're in. Your phone case, your lunch container, the dashboard of your car. Plastic won because it melts into any shape imaginable, costs next to nothing, and won't rust like metal, rot like wood, or shatter like glass. Hospitals depend on it for sterile syringes and IV bags. Food producers depend on it to keep bread fresh for weeks instead of days. So when someone says we should just get rid of plastic, the honest question is, replace it with what? At that price, at that scale? For decades, the answer has been nothing. Removing plastic from modern life is a little like pulling every nail out of a building. It looks fine, right up until it doesn't. Here's the catch, and it's the same trait that made plastic a miracle material. It does not break down. A bottle you throw away today will likely outlast your great-grandchildren, fracturing instead into smaller and smaller fragments that end up in rivers, soil, and researchers now confirm, the tissue of living organisms. We built the modern world on a material that never leaves, and every year, we make more of it. Every attempt at a fix has run into the same wall, and understanding that wall is the key to understanding why this bamboo discovery is different. For decades, bioplastics kept failing in the same pattern: strong but non-biodegradable, biodegradable but weak, or biodegradable and strong but too expensive to scale. PLA, made from fermented cornstarch, only breaks down inside industrial composting facilities held above 58 degrees Celsius for weeks. In your backyard, it behaves exactly like ordinary plastic. It just sits there, and it's brittle, heat-sensitive, and competes with food crops for farmland. PHA breaks down more easily, but costs several times more to grow using bacteria, so it stayed a niche material. Starch-based plastics dissolve the moment they get wet. Cellulose acetate is tougher, but making it requires harsh chemicals that undercut the entire point. Each approach could hit one or two of the 3 goals: strength, biodegradability, affordability, but never all 3. The real obstacle wasn't a shortage of ideas, it was chemistry. Nobody had worked out how to restructure a plant's natural building blocks into something that behaves like plastic without bolting on the same oil-based chemicals that caused the problem to begin with. It's like trying to turn a pile of raw lumber into a steel beam with nothing but a saw. You know steel is possible, but you can't bend wood into it without rebuilding it at the molecular level. That is the wall the team in Harbin broke through. The discovery didn't come from an oil major or a Silicon Valley lab. It came from Northeast Forestry University in Harbin, China, a school that mostly researches trees. Lead researchers Haiping Wu and Dawei Zhao, working with a team at Shenyang University of Chemical Technology, decided to attempt something most materials scientists had quietly given up on: turning bamboo itself into true plastic. Bamboo's strength comes from cellulose, the same molecule that gives every plant its structure, locked together by extremely tight hydrogen bonds. Those bonds are why a bamboo stalk can stand up to strong wind, and they're exactly why bamboo has always resisted being reshaped. Try to force it into a mold, and it snaps instead of flowing. Earlier attempts at bamboo plastic took a shortcut: grind up bamboo fiber, mix it with conventional plastic resin, and let the resin do the actual binding. That produces a composite, roughly half bamboo, half petroleum, and because the resin is still in there, it never truly biodegrades. Wu and Zhao's team didn't blend bamboo with plastic. They converted bamboo into plastic in 2 steps. Step 1, they soaked bamboo cellulose in a solvent made from zinc chloride and formic acid. That solvent loosens the hydrogen bonds, holding the cellulose molecules rigid without damaging the molecules themselves, like carefully untangling a net without cutting a single strand of the string. Step 2, they introduced ethanol, which guides the freed cellulose molecules to reconnect in a new arrangement, one that forms bonds even tighter than the bamboo's original structure. No plastic resin added, no petrochemical binder, nothing left behind. They named the result BM plastic, bamboo molecular plastic, and a clever process means nothing without numbers to back it up, which is exactly where this story gets interesting. The tensile strength of BM plastic measures 110 megapascals, roughly double that of PLA, and it beats high-impact polystyrene, one of the most common plastics in consumer products. That number puts it in the range of certain steel and aluminum alloys used in vehicles and aircraft. In bending tests, it scored 6.41 gigapascals, outperforming ABS, the plastic in car dashboards, and in the Lego brick you've stepped on barefoot. It holds its shape above 180 degrees Celsius, and researchers left samples in 100 degrees Celsius heat for 7 straight days with zero cracking, then submerged samples in strong acid with no surface damage at all. A PLA cup exposed to that treatment would warp and crumble within days. On fracture toughness, bioplastics scored 80 kilojoules per cubic meter, beating both conventional plastic and most bioplastics on the market, meaning it can absorb a real impact without shattering. Then the number that matters most environmentally. In ordinary garden soil, no industrial composter required, it fully decomposed in about 50 days. And when researchers recycled it using the same solvent process, the material retained about 90% of its original strength. Regular plastic degrades with every recycling pass, which is why so much recycled plastic ends up downgraded into park benches. This one barely loses anything. All of it is published openly in Nature Communications, with every test result available for anyone to verify. None of that matters at scale, though, unless the raw material can actually support mass production, and this is where bamboo has an advantage almost no other plant can offer. Bamboo is the fastest growing plant on Earth. Some species grow more than 1 meter in a single day, and it regenerates from the same root system in 3 to 5 years, compared with 25 to 30 years for a pine forest, without ever needing replanting from seed. It produces roughly 5 times more biomass per hectare than a typical timber forest, pulls carbon from the air at a rate that rivals many trees, and grows on marginal land instead of competing with food crops the way corn-based PLA does. China alone holds more than 7.5 million hectares of bamboo forest across roughly 20 provinces and over 500 species, supporting an industry worth close to 320 billion yuan a year and more than 7.5 million farmers. Worldwide, bamboo covers about 22 million hectares across Asia, Africa, and South America, with harvesting infrastructure already fully operational. That existing supply chain is the difference between a lab curiosity and a material that can genuinely scale, since most promising materials do not die in the lab, but at the point where nobody can produce enough of them affordably. I know this is a lot of chemistry and engineering to sit with in one video, and if you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who wants to understand how things actually work, not just skim a headline. That's exactly the kind of viewer I make this channel for, and if you'd like to help keep this kind of deep dive research going, there's a simple, no-strings way to do it. A Ko-fi link in the description for anyone who wants to buy me a coffee. No pressure at all, just something there if this kind of story is worth supporting to you. Because here's where it gets genuinely practical. BM Plastic runs through standard injection molding machines, the same equipment already used to make most plastic products on Earth, and can be cut, drilled, and shaped with ordinary tools. Researchers proved it by producing lampshades, gears, packaging, and decorative parts on unmodified factory equipment, which matters enormously, since most bioplastics require entirely new production lines before a single product ships. The process also runs at room temperature, skipping the ovens and pressurized heating systems that make conventional plastic production so energy-hungry, and the chemicals involved, zinc chloride, formic acid, and ethanol, are common, inexpensive, and reusable. Researchers estimate production costs around $2,300 per ton, against roughly $1,200 per ton for conventional plastic. That gap looks discouraging until you factor in two things. Costs fall as any new process scales up, and the $1,200 figure for regular plastic doesn't include cleanup, health costs, or looming regulatory fines. Expenses one study projects could push its real cost to roughly $2,400 per ton by 2040. China isn't waiting to find out. The government launched a bamboo for plastic substitution plan in 2022, followed by a 3-year action plan in 2023. Bamboo fiber tableware exports rose 35% in 2025. Cities are installing bamboo piping in place of steel and cement. A bamboo-bodied drone has already flown, using bamboo for 25% of its structure, at 20% less weight, and roughly 1/4 the cost of a carbon fiber equivalent. Meanwhile, global plastics treaty negotiations collapsed in 2024, with nations unable to agree on production limits. The lesson from that failure is straightforward. Whoever builds the replacement first controls the market, regardless of what international agreements eventually say. The material isn't finished. It's rigid, which is great for structural parts but useless for flexible film or thin packaging. It needs to hold up reliably during years of use before breaking down after disposal, and going from lab batches to millions of tons of annual output is a genuinely massive industrial undertaking. But no other bioplastic has ever combined this level of strength, biodegradability, recyclability, manufacturing ease, and supply chain scale, all in the same material. It took the world about a century to build its dependence on plastic, and that dependence won't disappear overnight. What's different now is that for the first time, there's a material offering better performance and better sustainability in the same package, without asking anyone to accept a downgrade to get there. That's usually what real change looks like, not a sacrifice, but a better option nobody had built yet. If a grass that grows a meter a day was sitting in plain sight the entire time, the real question worth asking is what else nature already solved, quietly, while we were busy looking somewhere else.